Hi everyone, Beth here. Let's talk a little bit more about break even. If you're following along in your textbook on page 182, it goes on to talk about analyzing your break even a little bit further, and it talks about different cost behaviors. And I know I mentioned this in the last video and we've talked about it in class, but I just want to really emphasize a fixed cost. As you can see from the screen, it's the little graph there here, right? It's a straight line. So no matter how many units you sold, so if you look at your graph and say 1 unit here, 75 units here, 200,000 units here, it's still a straight line so that no matter how many units you sell, you still have to pay your rent, you still have to pay your interest, you still have to pay some great examples there, your insurance, your property taxes, office salaries, because salaries are fixed. It doesn't matter if you have your sales people on a salary instead of on, say, commission. You've got to pay that $50,000 a year, no matter what your sales are. And in the contrast, if you look at the variable costs here, right, it goes up at a steady rate. It's a linear equation. And again, you would have talked about this in math class, but it's directly related to the sales that you make. So as we talked about before, our cost of goods sold. Okay. So if we are selling lamps and we sell a lamp for $5 and it cost us $2 to buy that lamp, then as soon as we sell that lamp, we take that $2 out of what's sitting in inventory and put it through to the cost of goods sold. So then you'd have sales of $5 minus cost of goods sold of $2. Okay, but looking at it as a variable cost, um, looking at it as a variable cost, you would have sales of $5 minus variable costs of $2. And then here we're going to change the language just a little bit, whereas you're used to seeing sales minus cost of goods sold gives you gross profit. When we're talking about variable costs and break even, it's sales minus your variable costs gives you contribution margin. Okay, so in the example of the lamp, you've got sales of $5 if you sold one lamp, minus variable cost of $2, because that's the amount we bought that lamp at, gives you a contribution margin of $3. Okay, and the reason it's called a contribution margin is that is the amount from every sale that you have of lamps. $3 of that sale goes towards or is contributing to paying off your fixed cost, such as your rent. Okay, so you can figure it out that way. For every lamp I sell, I can contribute $3, our contribution margin, contribute $3 to paying off our rent. And we're going to be looking at that further when we look at the formulas and the calculations. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about fixed cost and we've talked about variable costs. Now we have something that's called semi-variable costs. Okay, and that's on page 183. And semi-variable costs are sometimes there's a fixed portion related to it and sometimes there's a variable portion related to it. Okay, and the best example that I can think of to explain is if anybody has ever seen a power bill. Okay, there's a fixed amount that you've got to pay no matter what, and then there's a variable portion depending on how much power you've actually used in that month. But no matter, even if you never turn a light on in your house, you're still going to get a power bill, which is a fixed amount just for the privilege of having that meter hooked up to your house. Another example would be your cell phone bill. Okay, if you bought a phone and you have to pay part of that phone off on every bill, and then also there's an add-on or even for your data, right? So for the portion that goes to paying off your cell phone, and no matter how much data you use, you pay, say, $20, $30 a month. Then on top of that, maybe you used a little bit of long distance charges. Maybe you went over your minutes, so therefore you have to pay an extra amount. So that's the variable amount. Depending on how much you use your phone, all of a sudden you've got an extra amount you've got to pay per minute. Okay, so those are what's called semi-variable costs. I've also heard them referred to as semi-fixed cost. Part of it's fixed, part of it's variable. All right. Okay. So at this point, we are at the 6 minute and 30-second spot. So I'm going to stop it there. That is your introduction to fixed, variable, and semi-variable.